Hi, everybody, and welcome to Observing with Webb for March of 2017, where the armchair astronomer figures out what they're looking at, why it's so cool, and what they should check out next. So don't forget to check out my Podbean page. Just look for Mr. Webb at .podbean.com, the YouTube channel, which you're looking at right now. And don't forget my Twitter feed at Mr. Webb PV, all one word, all lowercase. So what do we got going on for March? Well, it's an interesting month. We've got all 5 naked eye planets, and Venus has some very interesting stuff happening to it. And we also have an occultation of Aldebaran. So let me get right to it and talk about the planets that you're going to see. Sunset, which you can see Venus and Mars and Mercury. And also we'll talk about Jupiter, because you can see Jupiter throughout the night. And then in the morning, you will also still be able to see Jupiter, and as well you'll be able to see Saturn in the morning. So let's go. Let me take you a little roundabout way here. Okay, so let me look at March 3rd. Sunset is, now no daylight savings time, about 6 o'clock, okay? So what you'll be looking at is Venus is going to be very nice and bright and pretty high up in the sky. However, this is only for the first half of the month. Also up here, you'll see Mars as well. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit. Uranus is obviously a telescopic one, but anyway, Mars and Venus, you can see them with your naked eye around sunset. Now, what's going to happen throughout the month is Venus is going to get lower and lower in the sky, so it's going to get harder and harder to see, although it's still pretty bright, so you shouldn't have much of a problem. And right about the 16th is pretty much when it gets too low to see, because it's still bright around sunset. But then what happens on the 16th is, why don't you try going out and seeing if you can see Venus? This is sunset, 6:12, and then go out the following morning at sunrise and look in the east, and you might, I gotta fast forward a little bit. Actually, you know what, you gotta go another day, another couple days. Let's see, maybe the 18th or 20th. And you might actually even be able to see Venus rising up on the other side as well. In fact, maybe, you know what, 22nd. It's probably a good day to do that when the sun's low. Now, I don't know if I'm even going to be able to see it, but it's really neat because you're seeing the transition of Venus from an evening star to a morning star. And what's happening, why is that happening? Well, sun's there, Earth is here, Venus is on the inside track, and what's been happening is Venus has been way over here, and it's coming along the inside, and right around mid-March is when Venus is right in between the sun and the Earth. And what's happening now is Venus is going to be on this side, and since the Earth rotates counterclockwise, this is the night side, night, 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 night. Now you can only see Venus really if you're on this side of the Earth and looking at Venus there. So that's why it's coming to be a morning star. But anyway, it's going to be there pretty much for the rest of 2017. And it will appear as big as Jupiter right now. If you look at it through a telescope, you'll see a nice crescent phase of it too. So Venus, really good month to check out Venus. In fact, let me go back to sunrise on the 22nd, and you notice that over the next couple days, it gets higher and higher in the sky. All right, so anyway, that's Venus. Let me go back to sunset on March 1st. And look to the west. Venus and Mars are up there, like I said. Mars is the other planet you'll see around sunset. And what will happen with Mars is not too much. It kind of moves out of Pisces and sort of into Aries. But really, not too much going on with Mars. It's just a red planet, so check it out. The other planet you might see around sunset is Mercury, which you might have noticed crept in here while we were talking about Mars. And really, probably the first day you might be able to see it is March 18th. March 18th, it's actually right next, well, sort of right next to, about 8 degrees away from Venus, but they're about the same height. So if you can find Venus, maybe with binoculars, you might just be able to find Mercury. Mercury will probably be dimmer, I would suspect. Yeah, Mercury is much dimmer, but you'll still be able to see them. And what you'll notice is that throughout the month, Mercury gets higher and higher in the sky right around sunset. So it's actually by the end of the month, by the 30th, it looks like it's about almost 20 degrees above the horizon at sunset. So good apparition for Mercury. Okay, so in summary, we've got Venus, Mars, and Mercury around sunset, depending on when you look. So Mercury and Venus actually do a little switcheroo in between themselves this month. And let's look for Jupiter. I don't see it. Let's go to like March 1st. Okay. And if you're looking around March 1st, you have to fast forward time. Oh, there we go. Fast forward time. And Jupiter's going to rise in the east-southeast around 8:30 at the end of the month. And what you notice is that it rises up, and it's actually in the sky for a pretty long amount of time, all the way into the morning. In fact, in the beginning of the month, when morning comes, it's over in the southwest. Now, toward the end of the month, let's go to March 30th, and let's look again at sunset. It's not quite risen yet, but, oh, there it is. At 7:38, now daylight savings time, that's about 8:30 at the end of the month. Jupiter is going to be up in the sky, and it's going to be moving across, and it'll set right at about dawn. So now is a very good time to check out Jupiter, especially with your binoculars or a telescope. Let me move on then to Saturn, since we're in that region of the sky. In the morning is when you're going to have to look for Saturn. It doesn't really rise any later than 2 a.m. And it'll only be about 25 degrees above the horizon. So if I zoom in here, and let's say it's right about morning time, it's going to be pretty much off in the south, maybe only about 25 degrees above the horizon. But this is a good time to check it out. It's right in between Sagittarius and Scorpio. Those are all the planets that we're going to see. Venus, Mars, and Mercury off in the sunset. Jupiter throughout the night, and then Jupiter and Saturn Jupiter and Saturn in the morning. And in fact, don't forget Venus in the morning at the end of the month. Let's move on to the events, which really I like to go around looking at the moon and how that works. I'm going to skip March 1st because that was the moon, Mars, and Venus. But this is coming out after that day, so I'm going to skip it. But what happens on the 4th of March is really one of the coolest things of the month. It's an occultation of Aldebaran, or Aldebaran, however you say it. In other words, we're going to watch a star completely disappear behind the moon. Now, this doesn't really appear to be all that great, doesn't sound great on the surface because, well, doesn't that happen all the time? I mean, if we look at the moon, in fact, let me fast forward time, doesn't the moon go through the constellations all the time and pass by stars? Yes. However, it's not so often that it goes past a very bright star that almost anybody can see disappear. Usually the moon is a little bit brighter than everything around it. So this is really cool. So what you want to do is you focus in on the moon, okay? And if you look at the moon, it's going to be right in Taurus on the night of the 4th. And as the night goes by, you'll see the moon going right through Taurus, okay? And you see that bright star right there. That's Aldebaran, okay? And let me zoom in a little bit more. Right about now, this is set for Lancaster County. So these times are for Lancaster County. Right at about 11:07 on the night of the 4th, you're going to see Aldebaran disappear behind the moon, and it disappears behind the dark side. And then, at least for us, and then about half an hour later, at about 11:35, it's going to reappear on the lit side of the moon. Now, for us in Lancaster, that's what's going to happen. Now, if I were in, let's say, New York, Aldebaran would actually graze, or the moon would graze Aldebaran, which would be pretty cool because you could actually see how there are craters and such on the moon that actually the star would go behind and blink in and out, Instead of just disappear, reappear, it might be disappear, reappear, disappear, reappear, disappear, and then reappear. It could be any of those. The further south you are in the United States, the longer the occultation is going to be. But there are some links that I'm going to put in the show notes here that'll tell you where to get some times for you. Or you could just Google Aldebaran Occultation 2017, and there's a lot of stuff there. But for those of us in Lancaster County, 11:07 to 11:35. Got it? Good. All right, now that moon looks to be almost first quarter, and in fact, the night of the 5th is when you have the first quarter moon. It's visible until midnight. And then what you'll notice if you follow the moon over the next couple of nights is that the moon is going to get bigger and bigger and thicker until March 12th, when we have two things going on. We've got the full moon that's out all night. Daylight savings time begins at 2 a.m. So I'm going to click this little sunshine thing on my starry night to make sure that I have that correct. And now you see Jupiter's over here. So if you are a good scientist or a good pattern recognizer, you might notice that on the night of the the night of the 14th, or the morning of the 15th, you're going to see Jupiter, the moon, and Spica all making a really nice triangle in the night sky. Really need to see those three sort of hanging out together. You got a bright star, you've got a planet with 4 Galilean moons that you can see, and of course the full moon. So neat stuff. On the 20th, let me back away here, March 20th, that's when, the moon's kind of moved pretty far down the ecliptic. In fact, let me go back one day. On March 20th, the moon and Saturn are pretty darn close together. We got a close encounter there, so look after 3 a.m., that's about when it rises, but before 7 a.m., which if I zoom out and fast forward time to 7 a.m., you see they're much higher in the sky. That's going to be when they're about 2 degrees apart. That's about it. That's actually pretty good. Okay. And then, also on the 20th is not only just the last quarter moon, not just the moon and Saturn being together, but it's also the spring equinox, which is astronomically the first day of spring. That's the day when we have almost exactly 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night throughout the entire globe. Even though meteorologically speaking, spring really starts in the beginning of March, but our weather's been so crazy lately, I'll let you decide when it starts. And then really the moon just sort of gets thinner and thinner and gets closer and closer to the sun from our perspective until we have a new moon on March 28th. That's when we have the darkest skies. And one last event for the month. Let's move to the 29th. And I'm going to change this to sunset, and that means we're probably going to want to look west. If we look in the west, you're going to see, over 2 days, first of all, on the 29th at sunset, Mercury will be up there, so you can find that, and you'll have the moon right nearby. Again, I would recommend binoculars, but you can see those two not far apart. And then on the following night, Mars and the moon are also close together, a little closer than to Mercury, but there you go. You've got 2 neat close encounters, one right after another at the end of the month. And sunset's right about 7:30, so make sure you get out there then. Hopefully you can get out there with the hopefully warmer weather and experience some very clear dark skies for the month of March.